For the final step, we'll do the hem for each pant leg. The directions read, using a seam gauge, turn a 1/2 inch to the inside of the garment and press with an iron. Next, turn the hem to the inside of the garment again at a 1/2 inch and pin in place. Stitch following the upper fold. You can also stitch along the lower fold like it's pictured, but it's not necessary. That is your choice. Trim all threads and press. So we have our pair of pants here on the ironing table. This is what we call a sleeve board in fashion. It is a tool. It's a little tiny ironing board that allows us to put like a pant leg over it or a cuff of a shirt so that we can do some more intricate type of three-dimensional sewing. So the first thing you'll do is turn your pants inside out. Take note where your tape is. You don't want to press the pants where the tape is, and I don't want to take them off just yet, the masking tape. I'm going to insert the sleeve board into the pant leg. This says to fold it over a 1/2 inch, which on my seam gauge is the center line between the end and the 1. That's a 1/2 inch. I want to make sure that what I'm folding over is actually a 1/2 inch. I bring in the iron and press it down. As I continue, it's the same story. 1/2 inch from the edge of the blue to the end of the seam gauge. And if we've done a nice job with our grain lines, turning over that 1/2 inch is pretty easy. We don't have to measure it everywhere we go. And if you find some threads along the way that need trimming, please trim them. So same thing here, 1/2 inch. And last, again, we're on grain, so I can just tug at it a little bit, and that 1/2 inch falls perfectly where it needs to be. Next, you're going to do it one more time, and this time, instead of pressing, you're going to pin it. So I'm going to match up. Basically, it's just the thickness that we've already taken the time to measure. I'm going to roll that to the inside. You can also recheck the measurement, make sure it's a 1/2. But a lot of things that we do in fashion, we kind of feel our way through, or we measured really well the first time, so when we fold it over the next time, we don't have to take the time to measure again. The more you sew, the more you become confident with what you're doing. We are on grain, so when you turn it, that's all that it should really take to get it where it needs to be. Sometimes these plaids will match up, sometimes they won't, depending on if your pants are tapered at the bottom. These have a tiny bit of tapering, not a lot, but enough that in some areas it'll match, in other areas the plaids will not match. I believe it's down the front they match, but the back pattern piece is a little angled, if I'm remembering correctly. And like I said before, you don't have to watch me pin all this. You can be pinning while I am pinning. Or you can stop the video. You guys know how to pin. If you feel confident, you can drag the slider along the bottom of the vid and then hop on to where I'm stitching. I'm also going to do this one while I'm here. Now, another way to do it is to do it on each seam. And then give it that little bit of tension and just follow it across. My scissors hit the floor. I'm waiting for my pins to hit the floor. Okay, so now I'm just going to go one more time. I'll check it in a few places and make sure it is my 1/2 inch. I always pin my seams first. They're a good anchor spot. This looks like it's across the front, so our lines are matching up. Yeah, I'm going to press that just a little bit. And this must be across the back because the plaid is not matching up as I turn the hem. And that all has to do with taking something two-dimensional like fabric and turning it into a three-dimensional piece, whether it's artwork or it's clothing. That's where sometimes the geometry of it all works out and everything lines up, and other times, because of the slant of the body or the curve of a cutting line, it doesn't quite match up. Whoops, a couple more pins here. And then the last thing we do is take it to the sewing machine and stitch around the hem. And if you remember last year when we did hems, this one is the hem for jeans. We will put it over the edge of the machine. Always start your hem where there's a seam. Lower your presser foot down. You want the needle to pierce where the fold is on the left-hand side. Forward 3, back 3, and stitch around. When you get to the end, back stitch, and trim your threads. Remove your pins. Clean up your work as you go. So I know I have a white thread hanging here, so I want to make sure that I trim that. And lastly, stitch the other leg. Start at a seam. You're stitching right through the fold. The fold line is against the left toe, on the inside of the left toe, I should say, on the presser foot. Back stitch at the end. There we go. And take your pins out. The very last step of these pants is to take them to the ironing board and press them one last time. Make sure all of your threads are trimmed. I got one right there that I just found sticking to it anyways. turn them right side out. Bring it to the ironing board. You can take your tape off, clean them up, and you always want to do a final press of the hems. Whether you use the sleeve board as well as trim off any little threads that are still hanging out. I don't like to press creases in pants, so I do just what I did there. I'll show you in just a second. When I press a pair of pants, I kind of walk the iron